came in the fall to know just what their budgets would exactly look like. This change lets boards confidently set a budget and their staffing prior to the school year starting, rather than waiting until after students are already in the classroom. So this is a huge difference for school divisions. It really means that they have the ability by early April, end of April, to determine what their staffing levels will be and what their dollars will be for that next school year, rather than waiting till after September 30th, which is typically what has happened under the old model. Our new funding model also provides boards with more flexibility and autonomy. The old model consisted of 36 individual grant envelopes, and boards told us that reporting and administration that came along with it was way too much. We've streamlined our grants down to 15. So from 36, we've gone to 15, while still maintaining record levels of spending. This will reduce the time our schools have to spend on onerous government reporting, allowing them to better allocate their staffing and resources to, again, support our students. Everything comes down to supporting our students, making sure those resources get to the classroom. Within these 15 grants, we are still providing support for our most vulnerable children and students. Program unit funding, commonly referred to as PUF funding, still exists for students with learning delays prior to entering kindergarten. And I just want to repeat that, because there's a lot of misinformation out there. We are continuing the PUF funding for students with learning disabilities prior to entering kindergarten. As soon as these children enter kindergarten, they will fall under a newly created Specialized Learning Supports grant, which will provide them with consistent level of support for their K-12 studies. This will ensure none of our students fall through the cracks as they transition to grade school. So this will be continual funding as they enter kindergarten right through their whole educational journey. Our new funding model also continues to provide support for English as a second language students, refugee students, and First Nations, Métis, and Inuit students. Our new model also ensures that our education system remains sustainable. The McKinnon report made it clear that we had to stop doing the same things in the same way if we expected to bend the curve on provincial spending while still improving our outcomes. Between 2004 and 2019, inflation had grown by 33%, and enrollment had grown by 25%. But our operating costs in K-12 education grew by 80%. This is unsustainable, and that's why we are moving forward with the new funding model. As a government, we felt we owed it to our parents, students, and all taxpayers to get better outcomes for the money spent on education. This new model drives more dollars to the classroom, providing boards with the flexibility they need to improve outcomes for our students. I'd like to close by reiterating that Budget 2020 maintained record levels of funding for K-12 education in Alberta. That $8.223 billion we spent last year, we are spending again $8.223 billion this year. Under this new funding model, we've also been able to streamline our funding and find enough efficiencies to increase funding to every single school division across this province. So again, I'd like to say that through these efficiencies that we've been able to find in the reallocation under the new model, there's an additional approximately about $100 million that school boards will be able to access this upcoming year. So every single school division in the province will see an increase in this new 2020-21 school year. So thank you very much, and I think we're open for questions.
Sure, I agree with that statement, but so I'll ask for clarification on that. In terms of our revenue projections, as I pointed out, right now, globally, there is much economic uncertainty as a result of fears around the coronavirus and what that might do to the global economy. And so it's an example of quite frankly, the revenue volatility we face in the province. I do believe that our long-term economic assumptions that have led to our prediction on the price of oil, GDP growth, and corresponding revenues are sound and realistic. It doesn't mean that they may be different. We will monitor them and make adjustments accordingly. But I believe they're sound. Firstly, if we take a look at this last year, again, notwithstanding the current economic uncertainty here in the last few weeks of our fiscal year, our projections look like they were going to be almost bang on with the realities out there. So again, our department has a very strong, reputable history of doing a good job of forecasting revenues and economic variables that affect Alberta. And so I'm confident that they provided defensible economic indicators for us that have informed our revenue projections. But I will say this, again, in the event that broad economic conditions out of our control dictate that our revenues are lower, we will seek additional spending restraint.
And
on the second question, you need to identify who the few are.
Well, we all, I mean, as I said, we're just trying to be very transparent here. When we see tax breaks and more easiness and corporate world in general, especially the big one, and we see all these cuts really passed on to thousands of jobs and thousands of low incomes, thousands of middle class, whether in the health sector or the education sector. So that's what I mean by
sure.
So many to please the few.
Sure. Thanks, Sam. That provides clarification. Thank you for that. Firstly, there are no cuts in health and education. Number one, there are no reductions. We are funding health and education at record levels, and we will continue to do so. Secondly, as a key plank in our strategy of improving our business climate, we have reduced corporate taxes, and we've reduced corporate tax rates from 12% to 10%, and they will go further down to 8%. And so that's not a handout. We're just reducing taxation levels. And over 100,000 corporations in this province, not just a few big corporations, over 100,000 businesses will benefit from that reduction in taxation. They will have more capital to expand their businesses, to hire more Albertans and put more people back to work and grow the economy. Because at the end of the day, government does not create wealth. Government does not create prosperity. Prosperity will only be created as government creates a very competitive business environment that will attract investment. And that's what we're intending to do. And we're beginning to see some results. That's why I'm hopeful that 2020 could be a turnaround here.
Thanks, Minister.
How this budget is going to be beneficial for a common man when school and college fees are going up and they are going to pay more in income taxes because of the de-indexation of the incomes from the it's called creepy tax. So how will a common man be benefited from this budget?
Well, that's a good question. Firstly, I'll say this, that income taxes are not going up. We have de-indexed the personal exemptions, but you will pay the same amount of tax based on this year as you would have last year based on the same level of income. So taxes are not going up. In terms of in terms of advanced education, tuition fees, the McKinnon panel pointed out that in Alberta, the government funds a disproportionately high percentage of advanced education costs relative to other provinces. We've had a tuition freeze in this province for, I believe, over 5 years. And so in Budget 2019, we lifted the tuition freeze, not entirely. We limited it to basically a lift of 3 years of up to 7% per year. And over that time, if institutions use that room, they don't have to, but if they do use that tuition room, our tuition fees will approximate those of other provinces. And remember, Alberta has been an outlier in the costs of advanced education. The McKinnon panel pointed out that on average, the cost of every full-time learning equivalent, in other words, every full-time student in this province, it costs us over $10,000 more per year per student than the average of Ontario, BC, and Quebec. So as a result of that, we are reducing over the 3 years. We're going to be slowly reducing our grant funding to post-secondary institutions. At the same time, we're allowing them to adjust their tuition fees to approximate that of other provinces, and we're also reducing red tape on those institutions so they can go out and be more entrepreneurial and raise their own source revenue. And again, over time, provincial support for advanced education in this province will begin to mirror that of other provincial levels.
Thank you.
Yes?
Dr. Grange, I'm so happy to see you here today. I'm a TUCB school principal, and right now I'm the CEO of my television program. So my question to you is, like, I believe that professionalism is paramount to all the teachers. So how can we prevent the disgruntled, for whatever reasons, teachers go on the Facebook and spreading fake news about what's happening and creating fear to all the professionals? Because I have seen a few on Facebook, and I'm not saying that all they're doing, I am protecting the integrity of our profession, but telling each of them to say, why don't you just contact, the Ministry of Education directly, instead of spreading news like this, creating fear, anger, and so on. So what can you do personally to reduce that?
Right. Well, and I appreciate the question, and it is a very real scenario that's out there. I've had the conversation as recently as last week with the president of the ATA, of the Alberta Teachers Association, to look at how we can improve the communication to teachers and try and stem the misinformation that is happening out there. That being said, I cannot control every individual and what they post. We are certainly, as a department, putting truth and facts out there so that, and are willing to talk to every single teacher that wants to approach us. As I go across the province, as I said earlier, I've done about 90% of my tour across the province. Whenever I go into a new school division, new area, I really try and meet with some of the ATA locals that are there, talk to teachers, and really get into the schools and meet with them just to have that relationship so that they do understand what we're doing and why we're doing it. But again, there is a lot of misinformation. There's individuals and special interest groups that really want to perpetuate that misinformation. I think some of it has to do with what Mr. Taves had mentioned earlier, that we're going into a negotiating time period where with every public sector contract union in the province, and so that is perhaps fueling some of it. But again, the more information, the more truth that we can put out there, the more facts. That is the emphasis of my department, because I do believe that teachers as a whole are incredible people, dedicated to their profession. They really want to do a great job and serve our students, these children. We have 720,000 students in kindergarten to grade 12 education. And for the most part, the teachers are doing an absolute amazing job out there. And I really want to reinforce those that are doing what they're, fulfilling that task. But I need everyone here, including all the media, to help in dispelling those myths that are out there and misinformation. But thank you for the question. We're trying our best.
Yes.
I have two questions. I'd like to please get Minister Traves' comment on Alberta road tests, because there is in the budget, there's filling gaps for labor market and one of them is training for class 1. I'm wondering if there's anything that's going to happen differently with road tests, because in the past year it's been lower with the availability of road tests. The second question is I'd like to get Minister LaGrange's comment on tuition increases, 11% projected for 2020, 250 jobs off from U of C last year, projected 230 positions off from SAIT this year.
I think that would be post-secondary. That
Yes.
would be Minister Nicolaides.
I'm happy to answer that.
Okay.
That
Sure.
would, be under.
Go ahead. Thank
All
you.
right, okay, good. Well, first, with respect to our piece in the fiscal plan around heavy transport jobs, we have a situation in this province where we have a shortage of class 1 drivers effectively. right now, and we have a whole group of unemployed Albertans that need a job. And we have, due to increased training requirements for Class 1 drivers and a bottleneck with our testing capacity, we've identified that that is an area that we need to fix as a government. So I can't, stay tuned for future announcements. I believe the solution will be twofold. Firstly, I believe we need to ensure that unemployed Albertans have the ability to take the training, that there's enough training capacity out there, and that there are resources available for them so that they can in fact take the training to get their Class 1 license. And secondly, we need to ensure that we have adequate testing capacity so that we can ensure that prospective Class 1 drivers can book a test and pass the test and get into these trucks and pursue a career in the heavy truck transport industry. On the second question, and I offered to take it, and I'm not going to speak real specifically. Minister Nicolaides, of course, would be the one that can speak definitively on an institution-to-institution basis. But again, I'll just refer back to the McKinnon panel finding that we're spending well over $10,000 per year more per student in this province relative to the other 3 large provinces in Canada on advanced education. And so we absolutely have to bring that cost curve down if we're going to continue to be able to provide students a world-class post-secondary education in this province in a sustainable manner. And so you will see in post-secondary institutions measures to reduce their costs. And as you're observing, in some cases that will result in a reduction of faculty as they reorganize the programs that they're offering, as they look to find efficiencies and remove redundancies. But ultimately, we need to ensure that we can ensure the sustainability of our world-class post-secondary colleges and universities that we have in this province today, so that not only today's students can receive a great education, but the next generation can as well.
Yeah.
Yes?
So right now, the government are focused on job creation, but unfortunately, on the report on February 7th, the Statistics Canada says only Alberta are losing a job right now, mostly because of public sector. So do you have some kind of estimate date that we can create more job than losing job?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think a very pertinent question. The unemployment challenge that we have in this province today has in fact informed our focus to double down on job creation in Budget 2020. That we're confident that our broad-based approach to broadly improve the competitiveness of our business environment will in fact lead to investment and long-term sustainable job growth in the province. And again, as I mentioned, we're beginning to see indications that is starting to happen. At CNRL, for instance, they came out early in January and announced that they were going to increase their drilling program in Alberta in 2020 because of the job creation tax cut and because of the curtailment holiday that our government implemented for production from drills in the conventional basin. So, and we're seeing good news on the pipelines front. We have Enbridge Line 3 is expected to be completed. Industry believes it will be completed in 2020. We're predicting Q1 of 2021. We're encouraged that the federal government is proceeding with the Trans Mountain pipeline. And we're encouraged that, in fact, even with the expected cost increase, that they're committed to seeing that project finished. We're encouraged with TC Energy and their announcement that they're going to get going on Keystone XL, or their plans to get it rolling again in the not too distant future. And on top of that, existing midstream companies have plans to increase oil volumes through existing pipelines, through optimization, new technology, and debottlenecking. By the end of 2021, we're expecting an increase of over 300,000 barrels per day with existing pipelines. So again, that's just a small example of some of the positive signals we're seeing in terms of the business growing and the economy growing and signs of optimism. I can't provide you a definitive date. We've always known that our measures to broadly improve the competitiveness of the business environment would take time to reverse investment flows back into this province. And again, that additional investment then will, there'll be a bit of time then until that results in job creation. But I'm confident that those measures will accomplish what we've set out to do. Now, on a number of the specific measures, such as debottlenecking the Class 1 unemployed Albertans getting a Class 1 license, those are very specific things that we're going to do as a government on an ASAP basis. And we've also announced that we're going to increase our loan to the Orphan Well Association so that we can see additional oil and gas well reclamations take place right away in this upcoming season. And again, that will create jobs in regions up and down the eastern slope where they're badly needed, where we have very high unemployment rates. So we're not done with these announcements. As I mentioned, we're going to bring key capital projects forward that will create jobs in both the build as well as the long-term investment that those projects will attract. And stay tuned. There will be additional announcements to come, but we will put a real focus on job creation in the upcoming year, and we're confident that in time we will see the narrative change.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but Minister LaGrange has to get going, so I'm just going to excuse her for now. But we can continue with the questions in the room.
Thanks, Mister.
Thank you so much, and it's been a pleasure to be here with you today, so thank you.
Absolutely.
I have to be in Edmonton by 6:30, so
Thanks, Eve.
thank you.
Environment, including a nimble, modern regulatory environment, a very competitive tax jurisdiction, access to competitive capital, will in fact attract investment in this province. I'm confident. And again, I believe we're seeing initial signs that those measures are beginning to yield fruit.
If there's no more questions, we can...
Just one quick one, if you don't mind,
Sure.
Minister. I don't know if this is related in any way to your department or to your. It's related to the immigrants and people who come into this country new, and we know that at least 20% of Albertans are from immigrant background. The problem still we always try to bring a lot of, the qualified people, but yet when they arrive here, it's really hard for them to find jobs and get their education assessed properly and quickly. Maybe this is not related to the budget directly, but in a way a message to the government. Is there anything new coming down to 2020 that's going to ease the process up for immigrants to get to integrate faster into
Sure.
the workforce in Alberta?
Yeah, Sam, that's a great question, and it actually is a part of a Budget 2020. We actually identify the fact that we have brought forward legislation and will be implementing measures that will improve the recognition of qualifications and certifications in other countries that will improve the speed of recognition here in Alberta. We think that's critical. So new Albertans can in fact step into their areas of expertise and training and find better careers and jobs and make a big contribution to the province.
So this is part of this plan?
It
or
it is included in Budget 20. We identified in the fiscal plan.
Perfect, thanks.
All right, well, thank you very much.